The fairy tale romance of Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, maybe not as fairy tale as you think. Well, that's the picture that an author is painting in a new book. It's called Rising Star, The Making of Barack Obama. Now, I get it. He didn't say that they don't have a fairy tale romance, but he does say, and in fact interviews a woman who says that Barack Obama proposed to her twice.
Two times.
Before he met Michelle Obama, which makes you think. And then when you throw in also the factor of race in this whole thing, it makes you think that maybe Barack Obama was just with Michelle because it was good for his career.
But it's way more complicated than that. The woman's name is Sheila Miyoshi Yeager. She is now a professor at Oberlin College
in Ohio,
I believe Asian Studies. And in the mid-'60s, actually 1986, according to this new book that has just come out, in the mid-'60s, the book is called Rising Star, The Making of Barack Obama.
Mid-'80s.
Excuse me, mid-'80s.
You kept saying mid-'60s.
I don't know why I said
that. The mid-'80s,
In the mid-'80s, they met in Chicago when he was doing community outreach work. This is after he graduated from Columbia, but before he went to Harvard Law School. And they started dating, and it became extremely serious. And he proposed marriage to her, and she said no. Her parents objected because they felt she was too young at the time, but they kept dating. Mm-hmm. And when they kept dating, she says, and she told the author, that Barack Obama would tell her that he was going to be president of the United States. This is an audacious comment.
In the mid-'80s.
Reagan was president, obviously never an African-American rising to that level, yet he believed, and again, before Harvard, which is a real pedigree for him because he was editor-in-chief of the Law Review, but before Harvard, he believed he was going to be president, and then started talking about race. And race is really important here.
Right, and in fact, it's the reason that the woman, I'm sorry, what's her name, Sheila, says that she said no the second time because she felt like he was overambitious and that this wasn't going to work out.
So a year later, he meets Michelle Obama at a law firm in Chicago, and dates her, marries her, and everybody kind of knows the story after that. Now, I got to tell you something. There is a guy who wrote a book. His name is Christopher Anderson, and it is one of the best books I have, no, not one of, it is the best book I have ever read on Barack Obama. I have. It's Barack and Michelle, Portrait of an American Marriage. It's an incredible book if you want to read it. And he has a real depth of knowledge about this. And Christopher joins us right now. Christopher, it's an honor. Welcome to TMZ Live.
Believe me, it's my pleasure. I'm a big fan.
Well, thank you.
Oh, thanks.
So what do you think of this new information, and maybe it's not new, but this information about this woman that Barack Obama allegedly
proposed to twice?
Doesn't surprise me at all. It's fascinating because, he had a number of really serious relationships. In school, he was with a woman at Columbia, with a woman named Genevieve Cook, who was a little older than he was. She was white. She said at the time that he was very conflicted about his race. He really had been raised by his white grandparents in Honolulu. He'd gone to prep schools. He didn't feel that he connected with the average Black American. And that was a big problem in their relationship. And Genevieve Cook said that she felt that his next serious girlfriend would be an African-American woman. Well, it turned out to be not an African-American woman, but this Japanese-Dutch lady who I met in the Midwest. I think she was in Ohio, and he was in Chicago at the time. And there is a little bit of an overlap. I think that's interesting between his relationship with this new figure and Michelle. And Michelle, I mean, there's no doubt to me that theirs is the real deal. I write about that extensively. But, there were other reasons for him to gravitate toward a relationship with an African-American woman because he had political ambitions, and he felt that would be an important part of the puzzle, and he was right.
Yet she says, at least according to this new book, she says that he believed he would be president of the United States someday.
Yager said that.
Yager said that, and that despite that, he still asked her to marry him twice.
I know that does surprise me a bit. By the way, he made the same statement 4 years earlier to Genevieve Cook, his other girlfriend, he had a lot of relationships with mainly with Caucasian women. So, but I think when he really, when he saw Michelle for the first time, from then on he was pursuing her. But yeah, does it surprise me that he would have asked her to marry him? Yeah, that does surprise me.
Christopher, it seems like the insinuation in this new book is, and this is why this has been such a bombshell this morning, the insinuation is that perhaps Barack Obama's attraction to Michelle wasn't purely about love, and some of it was about his political aspirations, that it was a better look. What would you say to people who may feel like, wow, this dream relationship that we've all held up maybe isn't what it seemed?
The fact that she was that Michelle would have been a powerful asset certainly figures into it. But there is affection there, there is love there. But the fact is, he would never have gotten close to the White House if it weren't for her expertise, her contacts in Chicago. She had all the contacts. He didn't have any. They met in Chicago when Barack came, and he was basically her trainee. So she's always been a formidable figure in a way that these other women, frankly, although they're all successful women and smart, but they weren't Michelle.
Was Michelle the first African-American woman that he seriously dated?
I think so. And it was part of this package. He went to Chicago basically to find himself as a community organizer. I interviewed all these wonderful African-American women in Chicago who were just, they were the church ladies, that he befriended. And they took him in, and they knew that he was special, but that he needed to kind of be schooled in what it's like to be black in America, because he really hadn't a clue. And so it was all part of this giant education of Barack Obama that took place in the 80s.
You think Michelle changed that? Do you think that she kind of opened his eyes to that?
Totally. Well, I think Michelle really is, you can't say enough about what a remarkable person she is.
And speaking of remarkable, I want to say it one more time. Your book is so important in understanding Barack Obama and Michelle and the marriage, Barack and Michelle. It's fantastic. Thank you for writing it.
I really appreciate it, Harvey. And you are terrific. All this, I was just talking to you before we went on, but your scoops are just, I'm very impressed with you as a journalist and your whole operation there.
Well, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate the time.
Great. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Monica from Roanoke, Virginia, and I think that this story is crazy because this woman, Miss Yeager, why is she searching for something now? I think she's just as bad as Obama's half-brother in Africa, where she's reaching for it. Why are you talking now about your proposal?
But if it happened, why not talk about it?
Well, I really think that she's just looking for somebody to buy her new books.
Monica, I do have a question for you. That, at least according to Christopher Anderson, it was on Obama's mind about marrying an African-American woman because he felt it would be an impediment not to if he was going to run for a high political office. Do you think it would have made a difference if he were married to a non-African-American?
You know what? Possibly. But at the same time, maybe he did have that in the back of his mind, like, okay, I need to pick up my African princess or something. Maybe that was in his head. And then he did a chocolate. He fell in love,
So it could still be romantic, even though it started out as just good for his career.
Oh, my God. Make sure to subscribe to TMZ Live to keep up to date on the latest entertainment news.
And if you want to keep watching, click on one of these videos right now.